Thank you, Jeff. I will be talking about the Consumer Consulting Board, which is a different name for online research communities. And when I look at the GRIT report, which you all have and has been referred to quite a number of times, it paints a picture which is about research communities, which is as follows. It's the #1 emerging technique, about 45% adoption, 38% considering to do that. So client side as well as agency side would use that methodology as a tool or method. But if you look at what's inhibiting people, the top 2 reasons are budgetary constraints and fear of trying something new. And some others, if you look at the top 5, have a lot to do with knowledge. And so I compare the situation today of online research communities as teenagers and their first sexual experience. Everybody talks about it. Everybody thinks the other one is doing it. Everybody says they're doing it. Everybody wants to do it. But in the end, nobody really knows how to do it. And so consumer consulting boards as a differentiator of what we often say MROCs. If you look around us, there's a lot of things that are happening today with consumers, consumer behavior. Things like flossing, consumers are looking for those awesome brands that are human, that make mistakes and then apologize for it and give extra service. We have a hard time consumers filling out surveys, but consumers generate more information than ever before with social media, nothing new. If you look at what you can do with iMovie and all kinds of mobile devices today, consumers are professional amateurs in creating content, digital, audio, video, whatever. If you sum everything up, everything is social everything. So we can't hide the elephant as market researchers, and we need to take care of that. But if you look at the reality, the easy thing to do for us is to revert to technology. And that's my big fear, or my big concern if I look around. By doing so, we forget what social is really all about. And social is about human relationships and human insights. That's what it should be all about. And that's also what market research is about. It's about understanding humans. My personal opinion is that we are making the same mistakes as we did with panels. We're transferring them to some kind of community. We add some likes and interaction, but we use them for surveys. So we're basically doing nothing else than that and creating panels into some community type of feeling. We're talking a lot about big data. Well, I'm a quant guy, but I have a hard time figuring out what exactly it is we'll do with it, because we can't even handle small data sometimes. So my concern, or my message, is let's look at the humans, and hence the introduction of the Consumer Consulting Board. And we've written a book about it with our collective wisdom of how we tackle it. And you see a number of screenshots here. You can immediately tell that it's designed to be a positive brand touchpoint experience for consumers. It's usually branded, but it could also be category-wise. And we've done a lot of research on how to manage these. And I won't elaborate on that because I don't have time. I could talk for an hour about this. But the key takeaway of our collective wisdom of research that we've done on these, backed up by PhD research in the Netherlands, is that if you have a true engagement community, which could be anywhere from 3 weeks to ongoing, it doesn't have to be ongoing, and it's assembling people in an asynchronous fashion, and that's really where the transformational aspect of that research methodology is. If you compare the true engagement, task-based, gamified, all the buzzwords of today, compare that to non-gamified, panel-based approaches, you generate about 7 times more on-topic discussions if you do so. And there's also optimums to find. For example, a lot of clients ask me, can we set up a community with 400 people? Why would you do that? If you have 3-week engagement, 50 engaged consumers is more than enough. If you have more, people start scrolling, and they read, but they scroll and don't contribute because they think everything has already been said, and they have something like, why would I add anything else to this? So I want to show you 2 cases that we've done with clients that focus on that engagement. One is a study that we did for France KLM, airline in the airline industry. And here's the thing. If you would be going to Australia next month, the first images that would come to your mind would probably be, nice nature, nice view of the harbor in Sydney, things like that. But if you would start your travel, by the time you go out of your home, you may be hitting traffic, all the way up to the moment you would arrive in Australia. A lot of complex, unforeseen things that you don't want to happen to yourself will happen to yourself. One of those would be that if you fly from Philadelphia or New York to Australia, you'll have to make an international transfer. So Air France KLM came to us and they said, we want to understand this process, we want to understand it better, and see if we can come up and co-create some innovative services that we can tie into this. But we really have to have the consumer's vision on this. So we did a research study that was multi-phased. I won't go into all the details. Got a paper on that. If you would be interested, just drop me an email. I'll be more than happy to send it to you. But basically it was 3 phases. One was an incitement phase, which was focusing on observation. The second one was, that was with 36 frequent flyers. The second one was based on those frictions that we identified, we then co-created solutions with 46 new or fresh, similar profile, but fresh consumers, and then we did a quantitative validation to tell Air France KLM which innovations to take to market. The first thing that we did was what we call a Connect the Dots workshop. It was nothing else than a board game and qualitative research techniques that we applied to the R&D department, the marketing people, and the CMI people at Air France KLM. So basically what it is, we gave people personas, and then they would roll the dice, advance, and by coming onto certain spots in the board game, we would change the context of that persona, going from all of a sudden that person's battery of the mobile phone is dead, or he's traveling with kids, or et cetera, et cetera. So what that led to was recycling of new or previous research ideas, understand their current marketing assumptions, and in the end, we came up with 26 insights. An insight is something that we've defined at our company. So a very structured way of formulating a consumer friction that was centered into 5 homogeneous innovation platforms. Then we went into a consumer connection that was with those 36 frequent flyers. That consisted of 3 phases. Observation phase was a one-on-one blog engagement of 10 days with people that would actually go through an international transfer flight experience. They kept online diaries, you see photos, they made videos, they made stories and brought those stories back. The second phase, which was basically the second week, was a technique that we applied, which we call crowd interpretation. And crowd interpretation is nothing else in a nutshell than findings of one consumer, present that to other consumers, and ask them to interpret and analyze those data. So we would basically be using consumers as our partners in crime, as co-researchers, as co-analysts. I'll come back to it in just a second. And then in the last week of the community, we opened it up, made it peer-to-peer, and actually probed on the, let's say, meaningful observations. There weren't insights yet, but meaningful observations that we identified in the first 2 phases. Here's how crowd interpretation roughly works. So this is a screenshot of the community. You've got John and Anna, our 2 participants of the community, and we pick a story. An interesting story, here in this case from John. You see a photo there. Below you see his story about what that photo represents. We would invite a number of participants, doesn't matter how many, but we would invite a number of participants, and Anna would be asked, "This is what I see." And the crowd interpretation is a kind of laddering technique. So the first thing we do is, what do you see? What do you observe? What is it you see? What is it that you don't see? Et cetera, et cetera. So people would type, it's gamified, there's some time pressure, it's less important than the actual insight you get out of it. And then the second layer of laddering would be, what is your interpretation? Do you recognize it? How do you solve that problem? Et cetera, et cetera. So you really go deep into that same story that John came up with. And then the input of Anna is transferred back to John, and John evaluates that observation and that interpretation in terms of freshness, newness, relevance, correctness, whatever. There's a couple of metrics. By doing this multiple times with different meaningful observations from different people, we then come up with a scoreboard and a leaderboard, and somebody wins the game. Now, the game is subordinate to the results that we get. We generate an interactive database of over 1,000 pictures and stories that can be browsed and selected by Air France KLM, which is something that remains and that can be fueled with new insights. But the other thing is that by doing this, by having this approach, we went from the 26 original insights that we identified in the Connect the Dots workshop to 68 insights. So a significant increase of potential grounds for innovation, from 5 to 10 homogeneous insight platforms. The other major thing was, if we looked at just filtering out the insights that we got from the crowd interpretation, we had 21% of that shift from 26 to 68 came uniquely from the crowd. So not from us, not from Air France, but from consumers. Now, that doesn't mean that all these insights are good. They're as good and bad as any one of those that we as researchers or marketeers come up with, but they're unique, and there's things that you would otherwise overlook. So we thought that was a pretty decent finding. The other thing that we did in the second phase, the co-creation. So we put those frictions out with new consumers, and we would basically play games with them where they would develop ideas and interact with one another and deepen them out. And we would grade those from going from a rough diamond all the way up to a diamond ring. So the more elaborate and the more rich and the more interactive an idea became, and the more Air France KLM thought it was useful for them, we would give it a higher ranking. So we wouldn't give a label to an individual, we'd give a badge to a specific idea. And in the last week of that community, we had a designer who was actually designing a certain concept or an idea and put it almost as a concept board into the community. When we did this, the engagement was like tremendous, because people were telling us, wow, you're actually doing something with our research, and it's actually quick. You're acting upon it all the time. We had a whole internal communication program that was set up. So there was an internal Twitter stream, there was a newsletter, there were consumer pages that the R&D and marketing team could consult so that we could feed back the research findings almost in real time. So the key takeaway is that your consumers are probably one of the best consultants you can hire. And if you look at technology only, you will miss out on the human part of it. To end up, I want to show another illustration of it, which is a case that we did for Heineken and creating the Club of the Future. And the challenging thing here was, also got a paper on this if you want to. The challenging thing here was, how do we engage not only with clubbers, consumers, that's okay, that's doable, but how do we engage and co-create with designers? One of the things that we did, they're a tough to get target group, right? You don't tell them what to do. They're not those kind of people, they're creative. So we started off, for example, by selecting the participant designers, young designers, promising designers, by doing Cocreation sessions in Milan, New York, Sao Paulo, Tokyo. We selected them into the Club of the Future. But then the other challenge was, once we have them on that platform, how do we transfer our findings from the consumers to them? Giving them even a 20-page PowerPoint deck is probably not a good idea. They won't read through it, and again, they don't want to be told what to do. So we developed an iPad application, which is also accessible online, that would basically map the going out, the clubbing journey. So on the bottom, the icons that you see there, that maps the whole journey when you go out to a club, starting almost, arriving at the club all the way to taking a cab back home. So if you would click on those, you would see red dots appear, and if you clicked on a red dot there, you would see the consumer insight. And that was what we used as inspiration for the community and have the designers develop and come up with new ideas. What did it bring? Well, if you go to a bar, a club, a bar, it doesn't really matter. It's very universal. You may have had the friction or the frustration that you're standing at the bar, you're trying to get the attention of the bartender. There's a nice, pretty girl standing next to you, and she gets served before you, even she just arrived. The Bar of the Future will have an interactive bar tied to your credit card. You will actually tap the icon of the drink that you want. The bartender will be notified, and he will put the beer or whatever drink you have on that little spot there. It'll go off your tab, and you take your beer, no more frustration. Another one was that if you go dancing, you have a beer, right? You go dancing, you go for a smoke, you go to the restroom, you put your beer on the table. You come back, what happens? There's either 3 other beers, you don't know which one is yours, or your beer is simply gone. The Bar of the Future will have a cooled numbered shelf where you can put your beer on. You can go whatever you want to do, go haywire on the dance floor, come back and, sip from your beer. Very creative solutions. There was many, many more. I don't have time to elaborate on that, but that's what we did, and we really achieved engaging those designers, which was, as I said, a hard-to-get target group. We've written a blog on this, by the way, with a Philips case as well, next to this one that has appeared on Green Book. I think it was before the summer. For Heineken, it had a huge internal impact because they basically decided that design is one of their key pillars of activation right now. Next to, they do Champions League soccer, they do music, and they do 007. He drinks a Heineken, if you've seen 007. But next to that, now design is one of the key priorities. They actually built a pop-up bar in Milan last year. It had over 13,000 visitors, and it was open from 11 in the morning until 11 at night, so not even during nights. It had cool hunting, 250,000 views, more than 3 million on Vice, which is a digital video content platform. So a lot of PR material that was conversation worthy. I'm almost at the end, Jeff. 2 more minutes. So my key takeaway, just looking at these 2 cases, I would say let's not focus on technology, let's focus on humans. What we do to people, whether those are consumers or executives, is equally important as what we ask them. So we really need to give people, participants, consumers, social currency in a way, to actually want them to want to participate and go through them, not to them. So research for me is about activation. It's about leveraging knowledge among humans. It's about using them as partners. For example, the crowd interpretation, which across studies that we've done generates 20 to 40% unique insights. Research shouldn't be boring. It should be engaging, and it should be a positive brand touchpoint experience that they go and talk about it with their friends. And it should create internal leverage. People should start talking about research rather than just sitting in on a presentation. So as I said, we wrote a book about it, and one of my dreams, child dreams, was ever to become a quizmaster. I don't have a jiggle, but who can tell me the answer to the following question? Engagement in consumer consulting boards leads to how many more on-topic discussions? 7. All right, this is your book. And then the second one, crowd interpretation leads to what % of unique insights, gentlemen? 21 in this case? 20 to 40. You both have a book, I have a spare one. All right? Thank you very much.
We have maybe a minute or 2 for questions. Are there questions? If you raise your hand, we'll bring you a mic over here on the left.
Thanks, that was really interesting. What was the reaction from the designers?
The reaction of designers on?
In terms of getting the insights in that way.
Oh, they were very engaged. They actually thought it was pretty cool. We also afterwards invited them to the Club of the Future, so they would actually see their results. So Heineken really engaged with them, and the creative agency really engaged with them afterwards. I think they're ready for doing it again. Actually, we're doing a second follow-up, not about the Club of the Future, but about another topic. And so these people, like this, we could reactivate them. Absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Other questions? Up
Yes,
here in the front, please, on the left.
Over how long a period of time did the Heineken study and also the Air France study occur?
The Air France study was 3 weeks in total for the first part, and then another 3 weeks for the second part. So, they were spread out, there were workshops, but like 2 times 3 week engagements. And the Heineken case was a 3-week engagement with consumers, and then another 2 to 3 weeks with designers, but they were had some kind of overlap. So just in a nutshell, it depends on your program that you have. You could do it 3 weeks, you could do it 3 months, you could do 3 weeks and 2 months silence and then reactivate. So it really depends on your screenplay. A lot of clients ask me, I want to do an ongoing community. And the first question I ask, are you really sure you want to do it? Because the key success factor is your screenplay that you have. It's like going to the gym and you go 3 weeks and then it fades out if you don't have a plan to engage with consumers. So it really depends on what you want to do.
Other questions? We'll bring you a mic.
Yes.
In the back on the right.
I thought talking about showing them what you'd done as a result of the research and then that made them more engaged was really interesting. How have you translated that into other projects?
It's almost standard now definitely in any innovation type research that we do. We did it for Heinz, where it generated also 20% extra insights. We did it for a rock concert, a radio station where they wanted to know what people find cool at concerts, generated 40% insights. So we did it for Philips, for example, in a study that we did with Chinese consumers on sleeping behavior. And one of the things that brought us was the community was in English for a number of reasons, mainly budgetary and no travel, as you may well recognize. And one of the things that we had there is that Chinese people would bring a different cultural perspective that we wouldn't be aware of. They would say, so the community would tell us that sleeping behavior was important because of the fact that it makes you feel good, gives you a physiologically good feeling. But when we threw it back to the crowd, they said that for Chinese people, that was important. But the most important thing was that if you feel good and you sleep well, you'll perform well in professional life, you'll have success, and ultimately gain status. But if I'm a Chinese person, I can't say that about myself. I can tell about you. I can tell you, say that you're an ambitious person, but I can say about myself. So by doing that, we had a different cultural perspective of doing it. For us, it's standard approach now.
Do you want the folks to come up for their books?
I will give that to
Okay.
them if you don't mind.
Sure.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you.